नमस्ते प्रणाम गीता ध्यान ओम पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् O Bhagavad Gita, with which Lord Narayana himself gave enlightenment to Arjuna. Ancient sage Vyasa included it in the Mahabharata. O Goddess, contained in the 18 chapters and showerer of the nectar-like knowledge of non-dualism. O my affectionate mother, the destroyer of rebirth, I meditate upon thee. Salutations to Sri Krishna. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansachanuramardanam Devakim Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. O son of Vasudeva, the slayer of Kansa and Chanur, extreme delight for Mother Devaki. O Krishna, the supreme teacher of the universe, my salutations to you. And today now we take up the next shloka that Sri Krishna is cautioning us about fixing this mind on the sense objects. Yesterday he told us, Sri Krishna in that 62nd shloka, that how constantly dwelling on an idea, on a sense object, brings in some attachment to that object. That attachment, with that attachment comes the desire to enjoy that object. And when that desire doesn't get fulfilled, it leads to anger. Finally, krodhād abhijayate, then sets in the anger in the person. And Sri Krishna is now going to tell us the subsequent events that will happen when the anger sets in. And then Sri Krishna tells us these words of caution. Krodhād bhavati sammohaḥ, sammohāt smṛiti-vibhramaḥ, smṛiti-bhranśhād buddhi-nāśho, buddhi-nāśhāt praṇaśhyati. Krodhād bhavati sammohaḥ. Krodhād, from anger. Bhavati, arises, comes, sammohaḥ, the delusion. From anger, since we are not able to enjoy, fulfill that desire, sets in this anger. And once the anger sets in us, then we are deluded. Sammoha. From sammoha, sammohāt, smṛiti-vibhramaḥ. From that delusion arises loss of memory, loss of our thinking. smṛiti-vibhramaḥ, and then smṛiti-bhranśhād buddhi-nāśho. From this loss of memory, from this imbalanced thinking, it leads to what? It leads to buddhi-nāśho. We lose our discriminating power. We lose the power of discrimination of what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is evil, what is moral, what is immoral. We just lose that sense of discrimination, of reasoning. And from buddhi-nāśhāt praṇaśhyati, and from that loss of discrimination, loss of reasoning, ultimately it is praṇaśhyati, total destruction. Person is perished once for all. Therefore, it is so dangerous to have the thought of sense objects with our senses. Have that thought dwelling on the sense objects. It is absolutely dangerous, and that is what Sri Krishna has told us. From anger proceeds delusion, from delusion confused memory, from confused memory ruining of the reason, ruining of the ruining of the discriminatory power of discrimination, and from discrimination, total destruction. Praṇaśhyati, the end. That's it. So, Sri Krishna has, in these two verses, he has just, cautioned us. Beware, oh man, beware of putting your thoughts on the sense objects. Initially, it might be just casual thought. It may be just casual. You keep on thinking about that object. Then that casual thinking takes hold, takes the form of constant dwelling. And after constant dwelling, there is an attraction for that. Once you start constantly dwelling on a sense object, then sets in the attraction for that sense object. And once you're attracted, then what? Desire to enjoy it. Now, that desire to enjoy it, you don't know what it is going to lead you to. Is that enjoyment of that sense objects really going to give us a pleasure or a happiness or joy? We don't know. It is our just a notion that we are going to enjoy it. We are going to get a joy out of it. We are going to have a pleasure out of it. In reality, it may not happen at all. Because Sri Krishna, it is the law of nature, it is the law of Prakriti that everything comes in the pairs of opposites. And that's what Sri Krishna has time and again told, that be away from this pair of opposites of Sukha Dukkha, Labha Labho, Shubha Shubha. Be away from all these. Don't get trapped in this maya of the pairs of opposites. But we don't have that, we lose that power of discrimination when we constantly start dwelling on that object. We develop an attachment to that object. We start developing, we become desirous to enjoy that object, and then we lose the memory. Because in our memory somewhere it might be stored that no, that object is not good for us. This is normally the stored portion in our memory cautions us. But what happens when we smṛiti-vibhramaḥ, when we lose this memory? What happens? We are not able to connect to the ills of that object. We are not able to connect with the ills associated with that object in our memory, with that smṛiti-vibhramaḥ. And then that smṛiti-vibhramaḥ leads to buddhi-nāśho. Since we are not able to connect with the old impressions in our memory of the enjoying that object or similar objects, we have lost that use of memory, and then it results in loss of discrimination. Because now there is nothing which can tell us, Baba, don't do it, it is not good. Don't enjoy this, it is harmful for you. Don't get into that trap. It is going to put you down the path of elimination. No. That power of discrimination is lost the moment there is a smṛiti-bhram. The moment there is loss of memory of associating the so-called experience of enjoying the object. Earlier we might have had some experience, but we don't learn from it. Because we have lost that power, we have lost the memory with that constant desire having built up in our mind. And then one day, then we lose the discrimination whether we are going to do is good or bad, it is moral or immoral. Then we do it, and that's it. That is praṇaśhyati, leads us to our total destruction as a spiritual aspirant. It leads to the total destruction of our being a karma yogi. It leads to total destruction of our being a yogi, whether karma, whether dhyana, whether bhakti, whether raja. It is a total destruction then. It is praṇaśhyati. Now, with thought, this has happened just with the thought, casual thought, sorry, constant dwelling, and it is a chain reaction that Sri Krishna has elaborated in these two verses. Now, thought is very critical. The same thought, if we put that thought on the divine, it can take us to self-illumination, to self-mastery, to self-knowledge. But the same thought, even if initially casually we put it on the sense object, it can lead us to this total destruction, to the self. Instead of self-elimination, it becomes self-destruction, praṇaśhyati. And therefore, where you put the thought is extremely important. And in connection with this particular explanation that Sri Krishna has given, there is a beautiful story narrated by Sri Ramakrishna in this particular context. How thought is important. How where we are putting our mind is so much important. Just listen to this beautiful story that Sri Ramakrishna has told in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. A holy man was living in a temple. Nearby was the house of a harlot, a house of a woman of ill repute. Noticing how the profligate ones were frequenting her house, he once called the woman and warned her against her evil ways. Now this so-called holy man who was living in the temple, nearby was living one prostitute. And he used to continuously, daily watch how many people, immoral people, they are going to her house to fulfill their desires. So one day he called that prostitute and he just scolded her of her ill ways, of the immoral conduct that she was having. Then what happened? She lamented over her lot. Having heard all these things, she was so much, she was repenting for all the ills that she had been doing, for all the immoral acts that she was doing. And she prayed to the Lord for forgiveness. Although she could not put an end to her base profession. She had to earn her livelihood, but she was so much repentant. She prayed for forgiveness from the Lord. Oh Lord, what can I do? This has come to my lot. I am not willingly doing it, but I have to do it. Please forgive me, O Lord. So, the annoyed anchorite now started recording her lapses by piling a pebble every time a libertine visited her. Every time a person went, now what happened? He started constantly watching her. Who is going? Who is going? Now every time a person used to go to her house, he started putting a pebble around. Counting. Today one person has gone. Today people have gone. So 2 more pebbles. So he started putting a count of all such visits to the prostitute by keeping pebbles. When the heap of pebbles grew large, the holy man summoned the prostitute to his presence and censured her severely, pointing out to her pyramid-like enormity of her sins. Now the bunch of pebbles had grown to such an extent. One day he again called her and just scolded her. Look at all your, the ills that you have been doing. Look at all the sins that you have been committing. The mountain of sins has grown to this extent. Look at this number of pebbles. The heartbroken whore died the same night. appealing to the Almighty for deliverance. The night when she was on her deathbed, she was praying to the Lord all the time, please forgive me, please forgive me. I have sinned, yes, but you are my ultimate deliverer from this sin. Oh Lord, I might have sinned. So the woman died. Strangely enough, that very night, the holy man also cast away. I mean, the holy man also departed. He also, passed away. The defiled remains of the former, of that prostitute, was cast away as food to vultures and jackals, because nobody was willing to give her a proper cremation. So her body was just thrown away. But the body of the holy man, coincidentally, he also had died the same night. The body of the latter was interred with due honors. A proper cremation took place with all the chanting of the mantras and all that. And lo, the development of the scene was quite different in the Yamaloka. On earth, it happened that they're both their bodies. They were, they met the end, suiting to their deeds on this, in those bodies. But in the Yamaloka, the scene was totally different. There, what happened? The soul of prostitute was escorted to Vaikuntha, while that of the anchorite of the holy person was consigned to hell. The excited holy man demanded an explanation from Lord Yama. What is this? I am such a holy person. I have been, worshipping the Lord in that temple for all through my life, and you are putting me to hell. Whereas that woman, that prostitute, all the while doing immoral acts, you are sending her to Vaikuntha. Is it proper? Is it justice? The reply came that the inviolable justice alone prevailed in the creation of the Lord. Although living in a polluted body, the prostitute's mind was ever fixed on the divine. Whereas the mind of the man in the holy body was always wandering to unholy concerns. He had that opportunity of dwelling in that holy body. He could have elevated himself to self-elimination, but he was only pointing out to the faults, to the ills, to the sins of that prostitute. He was only piling up that mountain of pebbles every time a person visited her house. While the earthly remains of both were fittingly disposed, the prostitute's body went to vultures and jackals. This holy man's body, physical body, it got properly cremated, chanting all the mantras. Body received their due justice. But the souls, that is what mattered. Where were their thoughts while they were living in this holy body? In those bodies, the thought of that holy person living in the holy body was always fixed on that prostitute, her doings. Whereas the thoughts of that prostitute dwelling in that unholy body, the so-called unholy body, were always aimed at the divine, aimed at the lotus feet of the Lord, begging his forgiveness, begging the mother's forgiveness, praying for the forgiveness from mother. And therefore, ultimately, the end were totally different. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna through this story tells us. Beware of your thoughts and everything will be right with you. Beware of your thoughts. And that's what Sri Krishna also has told us in these two verses, in these two shlokas. That if you put your thought on the divine, you will attain divine. But if you put your thoughts on the sense objects, even if it is casually initially, ultimately you will keep on brooding over that sense object, you will keep on thinking constantly about that sense object, and then you will develop an attraction for that sense object. Once you develop an attraction for that sense object, you will have the desire to enjoy that. And when that desire doesn't get fulfilled, you will become angry. Once that anger sets in, it is a loss of memory. smṛiti-bhranśhād. From the loss of memory, buddhi-nāśho. And from buddhi-nāśho, from the loss of power of discrimination, from the faculty of discrimination, of judging the right and the wrong, it is total destruction. It is the self-destruction, praṇaśhyati. And for that particular thing, in fact, Sri Krishna has also, why he cautions us? Because earlier, Sri Krishna has told us about putting the thought onto him. Putting the thought and meditate upon him to get into that state of yoga, to prevent our mind from getting attached to the sense objects. Tani sarvani sayyamma yukta asita matparaha. Focus your mind in totality to me. Think about me. Dwell upon me. But if you don't do that, if you allow your mind to dwell on the sense object, you will lead yourself to your self-destruction. And that is the path Sri Krishna has explained in this 62nd and 63rd shloka. So that was a wonderful teaching from Sri Krishna, wonderful story Sri Ramakrishna told us to make us aware, to make us cautious of how not to put our thoughts on the sense objects. So that is our reading of this 62 and 62nd and 63rd shloka today. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Sri Ramakrishna. Jai Thakur. Jai Ma. Jai Swami.